Hello and welcome to the Cup of Triathlon podcast. We're brought to you every week by our sponsors, oxygenaddict.com, wearebikehouse.co.uk and triathlonbox.co.uk. Now, this week the episode is a little bit different. I'm pre-recording this one because I'm going to be away in Lanzarote the week that you guys are listening to this. So I've pre-recorded a really great interview. I managed to get on the phone a couple of guys from America called John and Chris Thornham. They're two brothers and they started together the company that I think is going to go on to revolutionize affordable aerodynamic wheels for triathletes and cyclists. The company is called Flo Wheels and you can see about them at flowcycling.com. It's a great story because it's a story of triathlon wheels and carbon wheels that are built by a triathlete who's got the passion for the sport and his brother who's a passionate engineer. And they came together and decided that they thought the traditional offerings that were in the marketplace, they could produce something of better quality or of comparable quality for a much lower price. And I'm all about anything that provides much, much better value for cyclists, athletes and triathletes out there. So I really hope you enjoy this interview. I found John and Chris to be two really cool guys. I really got on with them. It was really good fun to have a chat with them. And more importantly, it was great from my point of view to get to ask people who've spent a lot of time in the wind tunnel the questions that I'd always wanted to know. Those questions about whether a certain set of wheels makes a difference compared to a different set of wheels, whether there really is a benefit in buying yourself a set of carbon wheels as opposed to just using your standard traditional training wheels. The answer that comes out of this podcast is that most definitely yes, there is an enormous benefit. I think a lot of you will be astonished by the numbers that the guys have come up with from the benefits of their aerodynamic testing, both in the real world and in the wind tunnel. And it's a really interesting interview. So thanks very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this interview with Chris and John Thornham of Flo Wheels. John and Chris Thornham from Flo Wheels, welcome to the Cup of Triathlon podcast. How are you both doing today?
Good. How are you guys doing?
You know, thanks so much for holding on, man. We've had the usual technical difficulties here getting this damn call recorded.
Hey, man, anything good is never easy, right?
I'll tell you what, recording on this computer is never easy. I was ready to throw it out the window, but here we are. Yes. We made it.
Awesome.
So listen, I was really excited to get you guys on the show because our regular listeners will know I'm a bit of a bike geek and I love carbon wheels and carbon bikes and all that kind of stuff. And a few years ago, to set the scene, one of my club mates came along and he said, "Hey Rob, check this out. I've just bought this wheel from America," and he produced one of your original Flow 60s, and quality and price and stuff like that. I was blown away by it. And he's a really good guy. He was injured at the time and he let me borrow the wheel for a month before he'd even ridden it himself.
Oh, that's a good friend.
Yeah, really good guy. Thanks, Robbie, if you're listening, mate. So I got to have a go on one of the first batches, I think, that shipped over to the UK back in probably early 2012. I was really impressed with it. So when the chance came along to get you guys on the show, I thought, you know, a bit of a long shot, but here you are, you've managed to make it on. So would you tell us a little bit about your company first, please?
Yeah. So, you know, I was a triathlete and I still kind of am. I haven't raced. I've been running more of a business lately, but we're still involved in the sport. But, you know, I was a triathlete and I was buying the product. I was looking at what race wheels I could buy. And there were the people who put a lot of time and R&D and budget into a wheel, and you were paying anywhere between, you know, $2,000 and $4,000 kind of on average. And then there were the companies at the time who were going direct to consumer, but they were, for the most part, going overseas and buying an open mold product. And open mold products at the time are based on, you know, 15 or 20-year-old technology. So you were getting a better price, but you were losing out on the performance and the quality of the product. So I ended up buying the higher dollar value wheel. And when it showed up, I just looked at it and thought, man, I really think that we can make something very similar and compete with some people in the marketplace and bring it to market for a better price. So I took the wheels home, and we're both mechanical engineers, And I showed the wheels to my brother who wasn't in the sport. And I said, hey, what do you think these cost? And he said $500. And when I told him, yeah, which is
Yeah,
normal, right? I remember the first time I saw the price of I think at the time when I started triathlon, the Felt DA had just come out. And I was like, ooh, that looks nice. And, I look at the price and I thought, that's like the price of a Yamaha motorcycle. Like, how is that
yeah,
possible, right? So I told him the price and he just about passed out. And I said, hey, do you think that we can do this? And, with our background, do you think that we can design a product that competes technically and sell it direct to the consumer? And he said, yeah. So we really knew nothing about international business, import, export. We had the mechanical engineering background. I had the cycling knowledge. So we literally just started piece by piece, step by step. We went overseas. We started in China, actually, with products there, and that was really bad. We had quite a bit of money invested in molds. We had about a year of work in, and right about a month before our first projected sale, we had been getting samples that weren't round, that had cosmetic defects, and it was always an excuse that, oh, we were rushed, we're sorry, the next batch will be better. Anyway, we kept putting pressure on them, and about a month before our first anticipated sale, they admitted that they were a brand new factory, they had no idea what they were doing, and they needed our engineering team to come over and teach them how to produce carbon fiber.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so we're like, that was, so we had to send out this big message and tell everyone that we were sorry, the sale wasn't going to happen, and we needed to go sort this out. So at the time, we had no money. This is Chris talking. I actually flew over to Taiwan, went and visited a bunch of factories. And there's a big difference when you get into this between China and Taiwan. Typically, Taiwan, they say, does up to 95% of the carbon fiber work in the world for bicycling. And, the quality, the intelligence, the systematic stuff is there. A lot of times, if you see something from China, if it's good quality, the R&D and the intellectual design comes from Taiwan, and they're just using some labor in China. So actually, I went through 6 different factories, and in my mind, there was a clear winner. And we picked a new factory in Taiwan, who was arguably the best factory out there, and we've been using them ever since. And that's kind of how the thing started. There were a lot of bumps in the road on the way to where we are today, but it's all worked out. So.
It's really interesting to talk to you because I was on your mailing list. I'd been following the Flow story right from there were threads over on Slow Twitch, and I'd signed up to the mailing list. Now, I remember really clearly when this email came out that said, with a month to go. And I guess it's worth pointing out to the listeners who don't know you, your selling model is kind of different in that you don't keep wheels in stock, but you kind of tell people, look, we're gonna have a batch arrive on this date and we're going to put them for sale on this date, and you essentially kind of order things in and sell them all out in one go, don't you? So it was a very, very ballsy move on your part to sort of say, look, the product isn't right. And looking back, obviously it's the only thing you can do, isn't it, if you want to keep your customers happy. But man, it would have been so easy at that point to put a bunch of kind of cheap wheels out there and make your money back. It must have been such a difficult decision to kind of say, let's pull the plug on this before we even start with the first factory.
It's a good question. From a product standpoint, it wasn't difficult because, I mean, we couldn't.
Yeah, you want to put your name behind your product, right?
From a we've been working at this, we just want to do this, stressed out, how do we afford this standpoint, that was difficult to make because, like we said, we're, just 2 guys, literally. I mean, the first wheel we made, and everyone talks about the garage story, but we were down in our garage and we had a Dremel tool, and we were, drilling holes out of the carbon fiber fairings and lining up how the spokes pass through. And I remember building it and putting the stickers on it, and we still have the original picture of us holding it. And Chris was still in his clothes from work, from the job we were working at, and I was, we're sitting there looking at it. But that's the first wheel we made, so it was a difficult decision, but it was the right decision to make. You also mentioned that our sales model was different, and the the reality is that we never planned for it to happen that way. The reason that we did the first, we used to call them pre-orders, now we call them orders, but the reason it was called a pre-order at the time is because when you get into business with a factory, there are minimum order quantities. So we had this minimum order quantity that we couldn't afford. So this was, this was.
I love the honesty of this. It's fantastic. It's so rare in business. We just couldn't afford the wheels yet.
Well, we couldn't. I mean, I think our minimum order quantity at the time was like 450 units, which I can tell you is not cheap. I remember sitting in a Whole Foods right before our first sale with my brother, just going, "How do we afford this?" We can't. So this was before Kickstarter. I don't know if you're familiar with Kickstarter, but Kickstarter is an American thing where you can basically put something up and people will fund it. So this didn't exist, and then we just looked at each other and said, well, let's offer this pre-order thing. Let's say that wheels will ship in 60 to 90 days. And so, okay, well, we'll do this. So the reason the pre-order thing started was because we didn't have the money. So we figured we'd open this thing up and we'd get some sales. Well, I remember it was February 23rd was the first day in 2012. And we had a dedicated server. We had all this stuff going, and we opened the sale at 10 a.m. There was like 600 and some people parked on the site, and we crashed the server like the second we went live. And we both kind of looked at each other and were like, "What do we do?" So we picked up the phone, called the server company. Luckily, we were back up in about 3 minutes. And then in 45 minutes, we sold 750 wheels, which was almost 2 containers for us, which blew our minds. So we assumed at that point that we would then have stock. We would be this company that had stock shipped and ordered like any regular business. Well, the reality is that while today, almost 4 years later, well, actually more than 4 years later, we're able to hold some wheels in stock. The Flow 30 is now currently in stock. Throughout the winter, we had most of the product in stock, but it's just we literally cannot make it fast enough to sell it. And we've had a lot of people that have said to us, well, simple economics tells you that you need to raise your prices. And we are so adamant about keeping our prices where they are because that was the reason that we started the company. It was the reason that we founded it. So if we go against our founding principles of raising the prices because there's an opportunity to make more money, that just goes against the whole point of the business. So
yeah,
yes,
good for you, man.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, is it sometimes challenging to get our product, especially in the summer months? Yes. And do we hate that? Absolutely. I think some people think that we do this because it's just this game that we play. But the reality is that if somebody comes to me and wants to buy a set of wheels, I want to ship it to them. So it's not like it's a plan. It's this thing that as you're growing, as you're self-funded, you have to be very careful with the money that you have in inventory and how much money you're using to grow the company. And you'll see, I mean, when we talk later here about some of the new product design, that is a very expensive, very time-consuming process that you have to schedule for appropriately. So.
Yeah, so let's go into a little bit about the design. You've mentioned that you're both engineers and you came from that background, and obviously you're a triathlete, and you kind of looked at it and said, I think we can do better than this. Now, originally, the first Flow wheels that came over were kind of carbon fairing with aluminium rims, and you've just launched the new sort of full carbon clinchers that are coming out. But let's go through the story a little bit, because I was fascinated to read about how you did all of your designs essentially on a computer and modeled it all, kind of modeled the airflow and things like that. So will you talk a little bit about that for us, please?
Sure. I mean, thanks. I appreciate that you like the design process. One of the things that we said, and one of the people that we've talked to recently, one of the reviewers is that just reviewed the product. We said that our design process is equally as important as the product itself, and the reason we say that is because it's really easy to get a cycling wheel. Like literally, you can fly to. You don't even have to fly to Taiwan. You can go to Alibaba and you can say, "Put my sticker on that wheel," and you have a wheel company. Now, there's been a lot of people that have done that. That some people have some success, but normally it doesn't really work. So that what we're creating to us and is really it's as equally as important as the product that we sell. So years ago when we started the business, we knew that people that were doing R&D at the time were using a ton of wind tunnel time. So you have to use a special wind tunnel because you need a low-speed wind tunnel. And the prices at the time were around $500 to $900 per hour in a wind tunnel. So it's extremely expensive. And in order to test the things that you need to test, you need to make some type of physical prototype, which is
Also expensive.
also very expensive. So and then you have to open molds, and there's a major cost that's associated with it. So at the time, Zip was reporting, who was another company that was doing a ton of R&D, that they were spending up to $250,000 to develop a single wheel, which we knew that we did not have. I think it's not going to happen. So
Yeah.
we said,
not going to bankroll that from the money down the back of the couch, are you?
No. So we said to ourselves, well, how do we figure out a way to do this? Originally, our idea that we just redesign the wheels with was something that we had in mind, but there needed to be software development that hadn't happened. So at the time, what we did was we were both working as engineers in Las Vegas, and we had a very good friend at an engineering firm that owned a license of the leading CFD software. And they weren't using it. So I used to take this guy to lunch all the time. He was a friend of mine, and I told him that we were starting this wheel company. And he said, if you ever need help with a CFD package or any CFD simulations, he said, let me know. So the software itself was about $60,000 to get it. And
whoa! Hey, just tell us what does CFD stand for?
CFD stands for Computational Fluid Dynamics. So basically,
gotcha. So it's like a computerized version of wind tunnel testing, right?
Accurate,
yeah, and it's really, really accurate. So it's basically a wind tunnel on a computer. And what it allows you to do is, with any sort of CAD CAM package, you can draft a shape, you can put it into this 3D environment, and you can run it. You can see what happens. So our friend offered to help us, and the only thing he wanted was a set of wheels. So
for his father-in-law and a round of golf.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we said, so we drafted a number of shapes based on some stuff that we had thought about. And with wheel testing or any type of aerodynamic testing, there's no equation that says this is fast. Really, you're doing a ton of guessing to try and find something, and you see trends and you can look in directions, but even if you go in that direction that you think, you can be stumped really easily because aerodynamics is a really funny thing. So at the time, we had a computer that ran for 28 days straight, and it produced a bunch of results, and we found a shape that we had drafted that was incredibly fast for what we did, and we reproduced that model. So in last December of 2014, we knew that we had to redesign something. So we sat down and we had the idea that traditional wheel design has been done in a way where people will draft a number of shapes. It's a very manual process, so you'll typically get maybe 10, 12 shapes that they will make a physical prototype of, or they'll look at, and then they go back and they make a change, and then they test it again, and it's back and forth, and then they say, okay, this is what we're going to produce. We knew that if we wanted to solve that problem and make something that was search for something that was fast, we had to automate the drafting and CFD process. So the first thing we did was we needed to understand what actually happens while you're riding on the road. So we built a custom data logger, and the data logger mounted to the front of a bicycle.
I saw pictures of this, man. It's like a whole sort of clip-on rig that goes on the front of a bike, right?
Yes.
And measures wind direction and speed and stuff. That's brilliant.
Yeah, actually bolt-on, because I don't know if I trust clip-on, but I get your point. Yeah, it mounts to the front of the bike. And what it did...
That's why you're an engineer and I'm a coach.
Exactly. We looked at it a few times going, it's going to hold at 40 miles an hour? I think so. But luckily it held. But we had a weather direction sensor, which is basically it was very highly accurate. It came from Germany. It was with plus or minus 1 degree, which most of them are around plus or minus 5 degrees. And it recorded a wind direction measurement, which is in the cycling world considered yaw. So if the wind is hitting you like straight on your face, that would be 0 degrees. And if it was hitting you from the side, directly from the side, that would be 90 degrees of yaw. So with aerodynamics, if you think of a wheel that's running straight down the road, as that yaw angle changes, well, the wind is actually hitting the wheel from a different angle. So that changes how the wheel performs aerodynamically.
Yeah, gotcha.
So we measured.
Gotcha. So it's not just as simple as riding along the road, is it?
No, and really you never experience zero. Zero is a very rare number to see. So we measured that, and we also measured relative velocity, which means how fast we're going relative to the wind. And the reason that's important is because we had to eliminate readings that were just garbage readings. So we rode the sensor over 4 Ironman courses, and we also rode it, drafting, climbing, descending, in groups all over the place, along the coast, along, wooded areas, up in mountains, anything you can imagine. We wanted to collect data. So in total, we collected 110,000 data points while we were riding. And then we took that information, and what we did is we just analyzed it. So we had GoPro footage that we were using to look at why we were getting readings that were irregular, what was happening. So we really learned what was valuable and what was just garbage, and we removed the garbage readings. And then we had created this graph that showed where you ride on average. So we know that today about 50% of your time is spent between 0 and 5 degrees of yaw, and that could be plus or minus. So, wind from the left or wind from the right.
Yeah.
Once we had that information, we went and we worked with a company called CD Adapco, which is the leading CFD company. I would say that they're phenomenal at what they do. And one of the reasons we worked with them is we've worked with them in the past, and they are great. They have a dedicated engineering team that took the guidance that we gave them and ran what we needed, but they also have the software that had been developed since our last design that we needed, and it was called Optimate. So what Optimate is it allowed us to create a custom algorithm. So based on the data that we collected, we created this algorithm with a list of parameters that we put into the CFD package, and then it iterates, which means it changes the rim shape automatically based on a base model that we gave it, which was our original wheel shapes, and then it makes an educated decision to change the shape of the rim, continually looking for a faster profile. And it does that.
Hey, that's really cool, man. So you've given it like this is the kind of situation that most athletes find themselves in the majority of the time. Here's the rim shape we found is fastest already.
Yep.
Set the computer to work doing all the hard work for you, and bang, out the other end pops the new fastest design, right?
Exactly. And the crazy
Brilliant.
thing about it is that one of the reasons we work with the engineering team too is they have a supercomputer. So you can add as many processors as you want to this software. So we had a 32-core cluster that was running this. We iterated over 500 rim shapes, which is, like I say, standard would probably be 10 to 12. So it's 50 times greater than what you would normally see. And if we use the same computer that we used on our original wheel design and ran that to do this same computation, it would have taken 4.5 years to do the computation. So the amount of computation that went into this is it's a lot. At the end of it, we had basically produced these rim shapes that were faster than anything we had seen. They had stability constraints in there to make sure that they're stable in wind. And then we opened the molds and we went to the wind tunnel and crossed our fingers because you can see anything in the wind tunnel. And some of our wheels, the Flow 60 carbon clincher was 28% faster than our old model, which is huge. And then, the speed's basically
28% faster than the previous one.
Yeah, 28% faster, which is
wow.
We were pretty happy. Every wheel was faster than the old models that we had made, and it's
So in the field where you're looking for like small percentage gains, usually that really is massive, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's big.
What does that translate to in terms of real world time saved against a standard wheel, or watts saved, or whatever? Have you got any numbers for that, do you think?
We do. We worked with a guy. So just a little information on wind tunnel. So wind tunnel testing is really, really good, but there are literally a million ways you can test something in a wind tunnel, and it changes your results. So we test wheels individually. The reason we test them individually is because we want to see what's happening with the wheel. Some people will test them with frames, but you literally would have to test every frame to really understand what is happening for every individual
and certain things like that.
And on top of that, you've got a different rider. So if you're 5'11" and 155 pounds and you have skinny legs, and then you put a guy who's 5'6" and 200 pounds with big burly legs, how does he affect the airflow versus the tall skinny guy?
So there's a certain element of the rider affecting it, and to a certain extent you've just got to kind of look at the wheel and go, well, this wheel is X amount faster standing on its own, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we do is we work with a guy who is called, and his name's Ryan Cooper, and he has a business called Best Bike Split. Now, what?
Yeah, I know that very well.
Yeah, so he is literally a genius. The guy's like one of the best. So the reason we started working with this guy is he contacted us and he had some ideas. One of the things that he started doing was he was watching the tour, I think it was in like 2011 or 2012, and he noticed that the Trek team was using this data model, and every time they would work with a rider and they would do a calculation to sort of figure out a setup or something, the calculation was taking the Trek team, who is also a group of brilliant people. So this is nothing against the Trek team. They're very smart. But the model they were running was taking them 7.5 hours to complete. Ryan, at the time, was a PhD student, I think, in mathematics, and he was working with a optimization mathematics. He went to his professor or his mentor at the time and said, look, I think I have this idea. I would like to run it. So he put this model together, and he could spit out the same data Trek was doing in 7.5 hours in about 3 seconds. And it is incredibly accurate. So since that time, Ryan has basically works with the Trek team, he works with Team Sky, he works with Team BMC, all the leading tour teams, and he works with a number of equipment manufacturers as well. So the data that he has put into his model is incredibly accurate. So if we're looking at actual time savings over an Ironman course, we send all of our CDA and wind tunnel data to Ryan Cooper, which allows him to give an incredibly accurate estimation of what you would save versus a standard training wheel set. So
like I'll give you a few examples of numbers. So
if the wind tunnel,
if we look at just the wheels, let's take this again. Remember that this is a standalone wheel in the wind tunnel, so you're not getting the rider, the frame, or any interaction like that. But if we look at the Flo 60 from 2012 over an Ironman, that would save you 4 minutes and 3 seconds. So the new Flo 60 Carbon Clincher can save you up to 5 minutes and 12 seconds. So you're getting an extra 1 minute and 9 seconds just by changing your front wheel. Now, if we go to aero, so if we look at the aerodynamics of this over a course, Ryan is actually right now putting together a whole new testing scenario for all of our new wheels. But I can look at some of the old data that we have and give you a pretty good idea of the difference that you can see with, let's say, a 90 and a disc over an Ironman. So we did a study a while ago where we took some common Ironman courses, and we used Ironman Florida because it's flat, and then we looked at Ironman Coeur d'Alene and Ironman Lake Placid because they're common races and they introduce hills.
Sure, yeah.
So we said, okay, let's look at this. I don't need that. Let's look at that as we have a training wheel set. So let's say your Mavic Open Pro or just a standard wheel that you're going to get. We'll run that over a course, and then we'll run our Flo 90 and Flo Disc over a course. So keep in mind that these are older numbers, and our new stuff will probably only improve. But if you look at a flat course like Ironman Florida, a very, very light wheel set, we used it. This article looked at weight versus aero. So
gotcha.
We said, okay, let's have a non-aero but almost impossibly light wheel set run against our wheels. So the light but un-aero wheel set on Ironman Florida will save you 2 seconds. Now, if you look at our new models, they're going to save you, based on this estimate and Ryan's numbers, which are very accurate, 9 minutes and 5 seconds.
Wow.
So, I mean, you're looking at 2 seconds versus over 9 minutes of time. Now, when you introduce hills, because if you're losing weight, you're still the differences are massive. So, if you improve your weight only, and you have a non-aero wheel set on Ironman, which course am I on? Coeur d'Alene, you'll save 1 minute and 42 seconds. But going to an aero wheel set, you're going to save 6 minutes and 39 seconds. So,
wow. So again, it's kind of 5 minutes faster there, isn't it, from having the disc and the 90 on, even on a hilly course?
yeah, and it's just this exact same power output, the exact same effort from the rider. You're just showing up to transition 5 to 10 minutes faster, kind of.
It's a big deal for guys who are chasing that Kona slot, and it can come down to a few minutes. Hey,
exactly.
Hey, listen, can I ask you guys, do you have any opinion or data on which wheel set would be better for athletes riding at sort of faster speeds and lower speeds? Because you read kind of conflicting opinions, but if we were to compare somebody who's like a front of the pack Ironman guy who's riding like 5 hours as a bike split, say, against someone in the age group who's riding 6.5 hours, would your recommendation for which wheel set they ride change for a given course?
To be honest with you, this whole speed thing that people talk about a lot, will it affect your yaw angle? Yes. The faster you go, in theory, the more shallow your yaw angle will be. But with all of the data that like we said, we collected 110,000 data points on the road. Even like we varied our speed. I mean, I rode Ironman St. George, and we flatted. It was a long day. It definitely wasn't out there at 25 miles an hour like Jan's out there doing. So
yeah.
Even at these, I think on that course I probably averaged 18 or 19 for the day, just because we were doing a lot of testing, and that computer that's quite a beast to ride. But even with those lower speeds, we still saw really shallow yaw angles compared to what we originally thought you would see. So my recommendation for any athlete really is to buy the wheel set that is the deepest you can control. So let me explain what that means. Is the 90 faster than the 60 on paper? Yes. We'll use a front wheel as an example, because the front wheel is what is is the wheel that's going to cause you the most issues in a crosswind.
Yeah, sure.
So if you put a 90 millimeter front wheel on a bike, it is faster than a 60 millimeter front wheel. But the problem with that is if you're descending or you're riding along the coast and you've got a lot of strong crosswinds, a deeper wheel is going to be more affected by the wind. So you've got this athlete who's kind of a timid or tentative bike handler. They put this crazy deep wheel on, and they can't stay in the aero bars. They're always out of the aero bars. They're terrified. They're holding on for dear life. And the biggest component of drag on your bike, bar none, is your body. So if you're forced to come out of the aero bars to try and control the bike, you've just lost all the time and more that 90 is going to save you over the 60 or now even our 45. So what we say is, hey, pick a front wheel that you can handle in any condition and ride that. And for most people, that's a Flow 60. I would say probably for triathletes, 90+% of triathletes pick a front Flow 60 because it's very fast and it's very versatile for a front wheel. Yeah, exactly. So then, so special cases, you've got that female athlete who's 100 pounds soaking wet, and a little bit of wind really causes her to move around. The front 45 would probably be better. And then you've got the guy who's just a really confident bike handler. He can, he's the guy who dodges obstacles in the road, and you're like, how did he do that? And he's changing his jersey at the same time. Put him on a front Flow 90. So if we look at the front, that's the front wheel. And the reason that the front wheel is so much more affected by crosswinds is because it has a steering axis, which is your fork. So if you get hit with a crosswind, it can cause the fork to turn, and you get that movement feeling, and that's what causes people to come out of their aero bars.
Yeah,
Now,
gotcha. So basically, the deeper they go at the front, in theory, it's faster, but it's also affected by that crosswind more, and it's going to make it kind of more twitchy and more difficult to control.
exactly. And your objective as a triathlete is to stay in the aero bars at all times. So now if we go to the back wheel, the rear wheel, that is not really affected by crosswinds as much because there's no steering axis. And in theory, your center of pressure is that puts the center. So your center of pressure on a bike with wind is kind of behind you. And the deeper that wheel gets, the more it moves the center of pressure backwards, which in theory increases your stability on the bike. So if you can move the pressure of the wind further back, it decreases the pressure on the front wheel, which has less of an effect for crosswinds. It improves your crosswind stability.
Yeah, cool. So that lines up with a lot of what you hear from time trialists who basically say, look, man, you ride the disc in any conditions possible because even when it's windy, that's even more of an advantage because the wind then also kind of produces some lift, takes the pressure off the front wheel and makes the front wheel actually easier to control, right?
Exactly.
You're exactly right. So for the rear wheel, there's really two options you can go with. We recommend that you ride our wheels nonstop. So you don't just put them on for a race, you ride them daily. Carbon clinchers, aluminum carbon wheels, whatever you want, we think you should ride them on a daily basis. So the most versatile rear wheel for a triathlete would be our Rear Flow 90. Some people will pick up a disc as an extra wheel, but we actually recommend, and I'm probably sure we're the largest exterior salespeople for a company called Wheel Builder in the United States. We recommend a lot of wheel covers to people. So what a wheel cover is, for somebody that doesn't know, is Wheel Builder makes these custom for our wheels. Is it's a plastic cover that you can put on the wheel during a race, which basically creates a flow disc because our flow disc is modeled off of the Flow 90 profile. And then when you're not racing, you can take it off. Or if you're in a race where a disc is not legal, you just ride your Rear Flow 90. So you really have two options. You can buy 3 wheels, 60-90 disc, or you can buy a 60-90 and then get a wheel cover, which is a great option.
There you go. Pop the disc cover on and you've got a disc when you want it, and then you can ride it all year round. That's really cool.
Yep.
Really impressive. That kind of covers my questions there, I guess, about sort of wheel selection for athletes, and it's eye-opening to hear someone like yourself in the industry who's got the information giving those hard numbers out and saying, look, if you get yourself a pair of 60s, you're going to be looking at saving 4 minutes. A disc and a 90, you're looking at 9 minutes, and anywhere in between. So there's no question there's a bit of an arms race going on there, isn't there, for people to get?
Yeah, for sure.
The next thing I wanted to ask you about, I noticed on your website, obviously you've said you've sold 15,000 wheels to 63 different countries these days. And I noticed there's a section on there that says Bike for a Kid.
Yep.
Will you tell us a bit about that program, please?
Yeah, sure. We've always kind of wanted to do something charitable. We've done that kind of stuff our whole lives. And when we started this company, it was really no different. We wanted to find a way to give back. And I think one of the coolest things I remember about being a kid growing up was riding my bike. I just loved it. I remember that was what I'd look forward to in the morning. I'd go out, I'd ride it. We had mountain bikes. We'd go down the little dirt track behind our house, and I would run over these bumps of dirt for hours on end, And unfortunately, there's a ton of kids who just don't have that opportunity. Their parents can't afford bikes. And we thought, you know what, why don't we develop some type of program where we can give kids that experience? So the whole program started from day one. Originally, what we did was every time we sold, we used to sell ceramic bearing wheels and stainless steel bearing wheels. And when we sold the ceramic bearing wheels, we would buy a bike and helmet for a child in need. This year we are discontinuing the ceramic line simply because it's really hard for us to prove that there's any performance gain with those. If you look at a ceramic bearing versus a standard stainless steel bearing, there is a difference. but we use really high quality stainless steel bearings, and it's it's really hard to say that there's an improvement. So because of that change, we are now donating 1% of all sales towards our program, and
it's actually more bikes than before. So
it'll be actually more bikes that we will donate as a result of that. So
cool.
Yeah, and in the program, we've actually partnered with Chris Lieto's company, More Than Sport. There are a ton of great people at that company, and basically this year the new thing is we're going to key Ironman events. So we'll be at the US 70.3 Championships in St. George. We will donate 150 bikes there, and we'll be back at Kona this year to do another donation there. And Chris's organization is really cool. I mean, last year at Kona we had Craig Alexander came by and built a couple bikes with us. We had Leanna Cave and Jenny Fletcher and
Luke McKenzie,
Beth Gerrards. I mean, you name it, they were there. And then we had our big giveaway, and just a ton. Lindsay Corbin showed up, and Kate Snow, and
it's cool because
that's really cool.
It's really
awesome.
Cool because the kids, they show up, and a lot of them know these athletes, and they're there. And we had races with the kids, so I mean they're riding around with these people, with these athletes, and
yeah,
the athletes love it. It's it's cool because sometimes you get so wrapped up in running a business, and you're worried about this or you're worried about that. But every time we do one of these events, it's kind of like pushing the reset button. You step out and you look at what's going on, and you think, all right, this is what it's what it's really about. It kind of, for me personally, it kind of like refocuses me, what I'm doing, and why. It lets you really see like the big picture. If a shipping container is a week late, does it really matter? No. I mean, yeah, it's a pain, and it's not what we want, but there's more to life than just running a business. So to me, it's like this checks and balance thing where it's always keeping you focused on what you're doing and why you're doing it.
I love that. That's great. Hey, well, listen, fellas, thank you very much for taking the time to come on the show. Just to wrap this up, what's the web address people can go to check out Flo Wheels?
Yeah, it's so Flo, FLO, cycling.com.
And the reason it's not FLOW is because FLOW cycling was taken as a URL when we started the company.
And so FLO is cooler, man.
Yeah, so we dropped the W, and now we have FLO.
And when's your next order going to be available to buy? Because I'm just wondering, when do we need to get this podcast out by if people are interested in purchasing some of your wheels, if they like what they see there?
April 28th looks like it's going to be our date, and it's going to be starting at 10 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time in the United States. So we've got about 1,000 wheels coming over, which is more than double that we've ever had in any order. We're really trying to have stock, so we hope anybody who wants them can buy them. That's our goal. So April 28th is the date.
That's awesome. Well, thanks again for taking the time to come on. It's been a great story, and I've loved getting the chance to ask you guys questions about time savings and the manufacturing process and stuff. So thanks very much.
Awesome, Rob. Thank you for having us. We really appreciate it.
Cheers now. So there we have it. There's our interview with the guys from Flo Wheels. You can check out their product over at flowcycling.com. Now, just before I wrap up today's episode, I just want to give a shout out to our sponsors and say thank you. If you want to check via these websites and go and support the people that support the show, that would be really appreciated. We've got triathlonbox.co.uk. They provide a really cool solution to carrying your kit from the car to your transition venue. It's a plastic box that fits on top of the top tube of your bike, doesn't fall off one side or the other. It's waterproof, so you can leave your stuff in it in transition, and it's lockable, so you've got a solution there for keeping your valuables in during the time you're out during the race as well. wearebikehouse.co.uk are a fantastic bike shop located in Gatley, which is in South Manchester. They've got online retail coming soon, but within their shop, they've got fantastic products, but they've also got fantastic service as well. So real old school bike shop ethos with new school approach to fantastic equipment. So please, if you get the chance in your local, go and check out the guys over at Bike House. And lastly, if you're interested in triathlon coaching, you can check out my website at oxygenaddict.com. I've got a variety of coaching packages to sort all levels of athletes and pockets. And recently released has been the Team Oxygen Addict coaching package, which gives you access to me through a private Facebook group, gives you access to a training plan written for your individual 70.3 or Ironman event, and it also gives you the opportunity to interact with other team members as well, which we're finding is even more valuable than the actual coaching and the training plan itself. So for more information, check out team.oxygenaddict.com or just follow the links through from the main page at oxygenaddict.com. I'd also like to thank our patrons. Patrons support the podcast by making a small monthly donation of £2, £5 or £10 a month. Really helpful to help keep the show running, and we really appreciate everybody who can find the time and money to help support the show. We really appreciate it. So a bit of a different episode this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. As usual, you can contact us for your nominations for Age Group Performance of the Week by sending a tweet over to Twitter at @CupOfTry, or you can email me direct with your questions for Coach's Couch to coachrobwilby@oxygenaddict.com. Hope you've had a great training and racing week. We'll be back next week with news of races, some race results, and full details of what's been going on over in Lanzarote. Until then, I hope you have a great time training. I hope you stay healthy, and we'll catch up with you again next week. Thanks very much for listening.